Hello, welcome back, everybody. Today I get to present again Robert Fox and Linda Black Elk, who gave a wonderful presentation yesterday. Robert Fox is a U.S. Air Force veteran from the Sahnish Nation and grew up in White Shield on the Fort Berthold Reservation. He is the current cultural wellness specialist at United Tribes, and he works with youth and elders on the reservation and at the college, bringing traditional perspectives, including prayer, history, language, and gardening, as well as parenting, budgeting, and healthy life skills. And Linda Black Elk is an ethnobotanist serving as the food sovereignty coordinator, also at United Tribes, specializing in teaching about culturally important plants and their uses as food, medicine, and materials. She has written for numerous publications and is the author of Watoto Unyutapi, a field guide to edible wild plants of the Dakota people. All right, you can take it away.
Awesome. Go ahead, Robert. I'll let you get started. I'm going to share our screen here.
Okay. Hello, I'm Robert Fox. I grew up in White Shield. I grew up on a smaller, like a ranch, where we had almost every kind of animal you could think of. And we did have gardens, and I did have relatives, uncles and stuff that owned bigger farms that farmed like, 1,000 acres and stuff. Kind of grew up around that. I am a single dad I have 4 daughters and 1 son, and my son and my youngest daughter are still in high school. They're a junior and a freshman. I started working here quite a while ago. At first, I worked in the dorms, and then I worked as in the cultural specialist, and then the fitness specialist. And I took 2 years off when I became a single dad, and I was Mr. Mom. And then I came back and I was working in the land grant department, and I was the agroecology tech, and I just moved over to the cultural wellness one about 2 months ago, but I still will be working with the gardens this summer. First thing I'm gonna talk about, if you can see the pictures here, that's our community garden. It was the original one that we had on the top where they're working in. That was the original garden that we had, and it's called the Ann Kuiper Garden because there was a lady that worked out here named Ann Kuiper, and she started like planting gardens and flowers and stuff around the campus, and she was the first one to do that. And she used to stay in a building right across the street from where the garden is. So when we started to have a community garden and kind of having garden stuff, they just named it after her. They've been doing community gardens probably for about 8 years now. We started with, we had to go around and find some of the different, how people were doing it in different places because it wasn't really not known. And when the first probably up until maybe 4 years ago, they were just for the community on campus. So it would be the staff and students and families that were on campus. And we happen to be one of the only campuses that I know around that has a elementary, a daycare, infant toddler center, all right on campus. So when we do like family or community things, we are actually we can really do them like we were in our own little community because we have all the age groups and everything on campus. You see that bottom left, it's a picture of, that's a raised bed. We put some raised beds around for kids, but most of them were to teach people how to grow gardens on raised beds for like elders or people, had back problems and stuff like that, where you can't bend over and bend down. This one is put out on behind it, from where like it looks like you're standing, is where you go into our dining hall. So we put this there and had the kids in the elementary help grow stuff. So when all the staff and the big building across is a co-ed dorm. So when people walk by going to eat, they were actually looking at a garden and food, and some of their kids or people that worked and helped growing them. So that's how we did that. And then one of the things that we did too, we were looking at going to having a real, I guess you would say like a real community type of garden, because we've had different people come out, sometimes families, and if they had to leave or something, then the gardens would be left and we'd have to take care of them, or they would, a lot of stuff would die. So we decided to do a real garden thing, which we were going to plant what people wanted, and everybody that still wanted to plant gardens on campus and stuff, we would all put them in certain places, and then everybody would garden, everybody would help take care of everything. So if somebody had to go on a vacation, or something came up, an emergency during the summer or something, there were still people, the community was still going to take care of everybody's gardens, and then everybody would harvest. But just when we were about to get that started, that's when COVID hit. So we're hoping to start that probably next summer for sure, of having, a full real community garden where everybody comes and helps everybody, and everybody eats and takes whatever they need for their families from the garden. So yeah, that's what's coming up. And we do have probably, about say 4 or 5 years ago is when we did open up to our community gardens to actually the whole community. So we have some of the gardens, we've had people that were just living in Bismarck, our Mandan area. We've had native and non-native people come on to our community gardens. And I was trying to find some pictures, but I couldn't find them. I have so much of the gardens, but we had just before COVID, we had a family that were from Africa that came in, and we gave plots, and it was really nice because we watched kind of how they planted and did their stuff, and that was really nice. So we were teaching each other back and forth of different ways of gardening, and that's what we'd also do in our community gardens, because we're working in our research gardens and different things around campus, that we let everybody know that signs up for a garden that will be around. And if they have any questions, they can just ask any of us guys, and we'll help them. And then we help them all the way from picking out what they want to, their seeds, all the way through to taking care of them, weeding, harvesting, everything. So we're kind of always there for them. It's not like some community gardens where you have your plot and water and stuff, and you just do whatever you want to do. We're actually here where we can help them and stuff. And on the bottom right pictures, that's one of the gardens that I started, and we did it's done through our tribe. We call it mound planting, and it would be also called, like people know it as Three Sisters or companion planting. That's where you have the corn, beans, and squash planted together. And if you look in the back, that little row along the back, also, and sometimes it's Four Sisters, or they'll call it up here, is that's sunflowers. And all these plants in my garden that I grew were all Auricora or Sahnish seeds. They were stuff I got from my family members and people who had them, elders. So that's how we did that. Can switch to the next one. Next one, Linda. And there it shows the gardens. And one of the things, if you remember looking at the front, we covered them and there wasn't like weeds growing all over. I really only had to garden. I only had to weed in this type of garden maybe twice in the beginning. And then we laid everything out and stuff started growing. So I didn't even have to do any more weeding after that. And that's because of once it started growing and the squash was growing, all the leaves came around and they covered everything up. So they were over, stronger than the weeds. So we didn't hardly have to pull anything. If there was something there, we just kind of let it grow because it wasn't enough to affect anything. And about when they do the companion, our Three Sisters planting, a lot of we were teaching people and stuff that they all help each other. Like one plant is putting something into the ground that the other plant is using, or there's different things that they're doing, like the beans that are put in nitrogen. They're also using the corn to climb up on a little bit and set up on them so they're not on the ground. And then the squash, once it starts going around on the ground and stuff, all the leaves will cover everything up so it keeps the weeds down. Plus, the way the mounds are built, they have like a little moat kind of around the outside of them. So when it rains and everything, water sits in there and will kind of hold it. And then with all the squash leaves, when you look, the sun's not there, so it actually will soak up the water more of the ground. It doesn't let it evaporate into the air as much. And the stories, there's a lot of different tribes have different stories about the three sisters, but they're all pretty similar. And one of the first, what they call the oldest sister, is the corn, because that's the first one that comes up and it's the strongest, and everything comes on that. And then like the middle sister is always the beans, because they're helping everything out, but they're still kind of growing around and they need the stronger corn one to come up. And then the squash, they're the youngest one because they're planted later. If you plant them too early, they'll cover everything up and nothing will get to the sunlight. So there's a lot of different little versions of the stories that different tribes have. And on the right side here, you see those are the squash I grew, and that was seeds we got from somebody that were pretty old. We didn't know how old they were, so we didn't know how much would grow, but that was the first year we grew them. And that darker one in the background, that one was 45 pounds, and the front one was like 42, something like that. It was really surprising. I was like, oh, I didn't know that, they would grow so big so quick. You can turn to the next page. And also, when we do a lot of our like community gardens and our research, we have a lot of workshops or trainings that go along with the when we're out in the gardens. And you see on here, there's pictures they show with the youth. They're having people come in and they're taking taste tests and learning how to like breed squash or crossbreed stuff, and then corn. And what we do a lot for culturally based too is we have the elders come out to our gardens when we're teaching kids and anybody who's out there. What we have a lot of times, we'll have the elders come out and they tell stories, all these different stories about gardening that they knew growing up. So people get like the cultural base, because among natives, like all the stuff we grow it's not a totally different thing from us. They're beings just like us, like we're beings. The animals are the animal beings. The plant and stuff are like plant beings. So they're all beings. So we have stories, and some are funny, some are learning, and they're just different ones. And then you hear how they'll talk about how they grew stuff a long time ago, like along the rivers, and how they had to clean stuff up. So you try to get a lot of the elders to come in whenever they can and tell stories, because that's really that's how we did a lot of teaching all the time, was through stories. Not, it was like oral. And on the bottom, those are my kids. We're planting our little field here. And one of the things in our tribe, which we're a little different than most of the tribes up in this area, is we're patriarchal. So we're like not followed. A lot of the stuff goes through the men, but the gardens and stuff were all owned, and the earth lodges and everything like that was all owned by the women. And when they gardened, the women were the ones that put the seeds in the ground and stuff. So like when I did stuff here, I would get stuff ready, and then I would have, even the other garden, I had my daughters come in and plant, put the seeds in the ground and stuff, and talk to them. And my son in this picture, he was younger, so he was young enough where he was able to help out. And one of the big things that we do too among natives is when we do our gardens, when we're first putting them in and getting the ground ready, it's okay to have kids come. And we actually encourage that and have them a lot of times take their shoes off if they can and walk around through there, because all that energy that kids have in them and everything, because they're young and everything, it's all going into the ground and it's helping. So when we plant the seeds, they're getting the benefit of young kids' energy to help them grow and everything. So, and, a lot of times, those are stories and that's what we were taught and everything. But a lot of stuff now has been coming when they're doing more scientific research and stuff. They're finding that, oh yeah, that kind of stuff does that does really happen. Similar things like that will happen. So, and one of the things too, I did tell in the last time, but when I started working and I got the job first time in the agroecology to work with the gardens, I went and talked to my mom and my grandma, because in our tribe, like I said, the women planted and they were owned and stuff, the garden. So I asked them, is it okay if I'm going to be doing this because it's going to be my job and stuff? And they were like, yeah, that's okay, because a lot of it was lost, and we understand that you're trying to help bring it back and you're going to teach other people and stuff like that. So I didn't have to, but culturally, that's what I did. So can switch to the next page. Here's some of it, shows you, here's some of our workshops we did. Like on the right side there, it's they were doing like seeds, planting them and using them in the little things to kind of how to start seeds and stuff. And we had the community come out, and we had a guy come in from another state that was like specialty in and all that, corn and squash and seed saving and stuff. So we did workshops on that. And on the top left side, you see we were doing like a breeding with the corn of how, if you want to keep it, not have it cross with any other corn and all the different things. So that was a community one. So we had people from all over, even out of Bismarck, Mandan, community members that came. And you see some of the young adults, that was also because it was open to all the tribal colleges that were in the state are close to. So some of them brought kids that were in their agroecology or in their gardening things and stuff. So they brought them to the training. So we do a lot of different trainings like that along with the communities, so that they, if they have questions about something, because like I said, there are a lot of them in like just a generation and a half, a lot of people have lost, gardening themselves. Can go to the next one. And here are some raised beds, like I was telling you about, and how we work with some of the communities. We have 6 of these, I think, on the high ones on the left side on our campus. And that's for some people, if you're like handicapped or you have bad backs or you're elder, those are designed for. They're 4 feet by 8 feet, and each of them the boards are 3 feet or 1 foot wide, so it's 3 feet high. And we did measurements and checked on different things with different people, and that's like the perfect size, because that way elders and people, if you stand there, you can reach without bending over or really having to reach. You can reach every part of the inside that's being grown, and it keeps all the stress and stuff off your back or legs or whatever. So that's why they have those. And on the bottom side, those are lower ones, and that's because the ones on the left, the bigger high ones, those are done. We put those, help build them and set them up at an elders center, a tribal elders center, so that the elders it was right outside their center. They could come out and garden and do everything themselves. And then the ones on the right, those are smaller ones, and we put those in, 8 of them. Those are done at a head start, a tribal head start, so that the little kids can go out. Those are smaller. They wouldn't be able to do stuff around the high raised beds. And underneath, if you see, I know they asked before, they didn't know if we put that on cement or something, but they're just put on the ground. And the shorter ones, it looks like they're put on something, but that was a real thin, we had some cardboard. So we put that down to kind of help any weeds or stuff coming up, but it would just naturally, overwatering in time, everything goes through. So it's nothing that stays there like plastic or anything.
Robert, there's a question real quick about how often do you refresh the dirt in those raised beds?
Most of them we haven't really refreshed them at all, because if you're growing the way we grow stuff in there and the type of stuff we grow, it's actually helping the soil kind of help it out. We don't just pull everything out right away. We let it sit in there after we harvest, and some of the stuff it's like tilled our ground, hand tilled back into the soil and stuff. So as long as you take care of it and you're not just planting the same thing in the same spot over and over and over, you don't have to change it. We haven't changed any of them. I think some of ours on campus are 8 years old, 7 years old, and we haven't had to change them, and they still grow really good.
Yeah, we just add more dirt in ours. Sometimes raised beds will have like rocks and then gravel on the bottom, and you put soil on the top. That just helps with drainage. It just depends on what kind of soil you have and what you want to do. Awesome. Thank you, Robert, so much. That was amazing. And I know Robert wants to say this, but he always forgets. If you're looking for more information, like on Three Sisters Gardens, you guys have probably all heard of Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. And that was an amazing Indigenous woman who actually gave all of her gardening advice to someone who wrote it down. And like all the gardening techniques in that book are valid and amazing, even for today, particularly in times of drought, which, as you guys all know, we're in a really severe drought right now. So that's fantastic. And then also, if you're interested, Dr. Jane Mount Pleasant she's written amazing papers on the use of Three Sisters Gardens to create microclimates for plants. So even just those mounds that Robert was talking about create a microclimate that extends the growing season and improves moisture retention, water retention for plants. So, even just those small mounds, it's really, really cool. So anyway, go ahead.
I'll finish up. Also, we'll probably get into more too, but we also have orchards on campus. People don't realize that, but we have an orchard on campus. So that helps us do workshops too. We have done all kinds of different workshops, and they'll probably talk more about that. But we have one of the things that surprised me, it was the first time I seen it, is we harvested some of our pears and different things here, and we did a grilling workshop, and they grilled fruit, and I was like, what? And it was really good, and it was really nice.
So good.
A lot of people.
Grilled fruit really is so much better than I think most people expect. We did a fruit grilling workshop. You can grill watermelon. If any of you have ever had grilled watermelon with a little feta on top, maybe some shredded basil, it's super amazing as a salad. You can Google it, I promise. The flavors, you won't think they'll work well together, but they do. And then we also did pear cider and apple cider. We have a cider press that we borrowed and did a workshop on pear and apple cider. So yeah, we do a lot. And so Mary was asking what I do as a food sovereignty coordinator. And it's really, it's a great question. So basically I coordinate events and information on, how we can be. First, you have to talk about what food sovereignty is, which is really important and has become a hugely hot topic today, not just in Indigenous communities. Food sovereignty is really important everywhere because, we're all asking ourselves the questions like, when you walk into a grocery store and you look around at all of the items in the store, do you really have a choice about what's in there? Do you really have a choice about what's on the shelves? And take that a step further. If you buy a bottle of ketchup, do you really know what's in there? Do you really have a choice, a say in what goes into there? You don't, is I suppose the short answer. So as the food sovereignty coordinator, I really like to ask those questions of my students and get them to start thinking how they can be more sovereign in their everyday lives. And that just means make choices for themselves. And live a life where you can actually make those decisions. So I can say what goes into my body because I can even say what kind of ketchup I use because I make my own at home, things like that, and I remember this one elder said, if you can't feed yourselves, you can't call yourselves sovereign, right? And so I think about that a lot and about how, where my food comes from, how it was grown, who harvested it. I even think about like what kind of fertilizer was used on it. I tell the story sometimes. I don't want to disturb anyone, but I actually did a migrant farm tour in Mexico, where I worked on migrant farms, and places where the fertilizer comes from is not something that most Americans want to think about, because a lot of our produce comes from Mexico. You know, it's definitely something I enjoy doing, talking about these issues. But I also do workshops on teaching people how to be more sovereign when it comes to food in their everyday lives. So like, you know, what can you learn from a garden? Well, Robert was telling you, you know, you can learn all about like how to grow things. You can learn about soil. You can learn, you know, about all of those physical things, you know, companion planting and what goes well with what. But really, gardens can teach us all kinds of things. And these are the kinds of things that I do for my job in my everyday life. So for example, I teach people how to grow good food, and not just food, you know, not just anything, right? So these are all annuals here in front of you, and we could grow all the yellow queen, or what do they call it? Silver queen sweet corn that we want, like you know, you find in the roadside stands. And admittedly, I understand how delicious grilled sweet corn on the cob is. You know, I know how delicious that is, but like I remember one lady in the talk that we gave yesterday was talking about how she didn't like vegetables very much. And, you know, it made me laugh. And I was thinking about it last night, because in our house, we have a different set of food groups than most people do. So for example, we do not consider potatoes and corn to be vegetables. And we don't let our children view them as vegetables. We call those starches. So, you know, our rules are you can only have one starch in a meal. And, you know, so if you have potatoes, you can't have bread, right? Things like that. And, you know, we talk about the different kinds of corn that constitute what is actually good for us. So for example, sweet corn on the cob actually has more simple sugar than a Snickers bar. One ear of sweet corn on the cob. You know, we think we're giving kids a vegetable when we give that to them. And admittedly, like I said, it's delicious, but we don't consider it a vegetable in our house because it's so high in sugar. Whereas indigenous varieties of corn, like the Pawnee eagle corn that you see there on the left side of your screen, called eagle corn. Do you see the cool little eagle markings on the kernels? It's so beautiful when it's grown. But this originally came from the Pawnee, and it's much lower glycemic index than other varieties of corn. And, you know, much lower in sugar. You can put it in soup. You can roast it on the cob, especially when it's young and more tender. You can dry it and make hominy out of it. It's fantastic. And it's a lot better for you. We also
teach a vegetable, Linda?
Still not a vegetable. Not in my
I know
house.
I have a problem with that.
Linda, you're breaking
Also,
my
one thing-
heart.
I know.
One of the things about the corn too is we had a corn research project where we did 50 native corns from around the country for 4 years out here, and then 10 hybrid ones from around to do the difference. And when we got done, I happened to met a guy in Minnesota. He was working on his master's, and he was able to go to the University of Minnesota. He was doing a protein test, and he said, "Hey, if you sneak me a couple of your stuff, I'll test them out, and we can see what the protein is." And on the hybrid, like the normal ones that everybody has nowadays, when he tested those are like 2 to 3% protein, and then we had a couple. I put some other native ones in there, and they were like from like 5 to 7, and then one of them, I was laughing because it just so happened to be the Rickarol white corn came out 9%, and it was really close. But see that difference of all the native corn that was
Much
being
higher
grown
in protein.
compared to sweet.
Yep, much higher in complex carbohydrates than simple carbohydrates. So Mary is asking also the great question of where purple popcorn seeds come from. Popcorn is a totally different variety of corn. And if you've ever seen a cob of popcorn, the kernels actually just look exactly the way the popcorn looks when it comes to you on the shelves of the grocery store. So they're much smaller and they get hard really quickly. right? They harden up really quickly. So just, and I'm not sure, I guess I should say this because this is important. You know, we often think about like, where does our food come from originally? Popcorn is a completely indigenous creation. Corn is an indigenous creation. It comes from, you know, it started off in South America as these tiny little cobs called teosinte, and it spread up into North America. But it's a totally indigenous creation. The same is true for popcorn. The same is true, you know, we think of Swiss chocolate or Italian chocolate. No, chocolate comes from indigenous people. We think of potatoes. Potatoes are actually an indigenous food. I don't like what they've done with like hybridizing white potatoes these days to be so starchy and high glycemic index, but potatoes are an indigenous food. And, you know, there are Peruvian tribes that have 600 varieties of potatoes. And actually, when we think about potatoes, they, you know, you can actually, the colored potatoes like purple potatoes and golden potatoes are much lower glycemic index. They have not been hybridized to be as high in starches. So they're a lot better for you. But, you know, even tomatoes, we think of Italian tomato sauces, right? Italians wouldn't have had tomatoes if it weren't for indigenous people growing and utilizing them for food down south. The same is true for chilies. You know, we think of spicy food as being something from cuisines in Asia, but you know, the spicy chilies actually are indigenous to North and South America. So yeah, I always think that's fun. We teach those kinds of things to our students, just so they know about those indigenous food contributions. In the center there, let me get through this real quick, is our Hidatsa shield beans. And those are delicious. I make a beautiful bean dip out of those. And they actually are much higher in protein than your standard pinto bean. And they hold up really well to soups and stews and things like that. And then of course on the right is that beautiful Gete Okosemen squash, which is now considered an Ojibwe squash, but originally came from the Miami tribe. And that is my favorite squash. The texture, the sweetness, it's great baked, it's great fried, it's, you know, great in soup, you know. I feel like Forrest Gump, you know, boiled squash, baked squash, all that stuff is so good. And you can actually access the seeds for all of these. We do seed distributions and exchanges at United Tribes Technical College. So if you're interested in any of these seeds and you're going to grow a garden, we have a seed library. And you guys, you know, I know library is your thing. We actually have a seed library where we hand seeds out to people and we have you guys grow them out. And all we ask is that you bring some of us back. It's kind of like returning your book to the library. We just ask that you bring some of it back to us. And that helps us maintain the freshness of the seed, but also genetic diversity. There's beautiful companies like Seed Savers Exchange that actually has a lot of gorgeous indigenous seed. And then there's the Seed Keepers Network, the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. And very often that Seed Keepers Network will send you little seed kits of, you know, various corn, beans, and squash and things. So we teach our students to grow food in gardens. We teach them to grow those the annuals like I was showing you, but we also teach them about perennial indigenous foods in gardens. You know, once you plant asparagus, it will never stop coming up for you. You know, I mean, that's just what I love about perennials is that you can plant them and then they just keep providing for you year after year after year. It's such a beautiful thing. On the left is Helianthus tuberosus. That's the Jerusalem artichoke, or some people call them sunchokes. And that's a really important traditional food. That's sort of the Northern Great Plains version of a potato. But it's actually helps with pancreatic function. It's not just a food, it's a medicine as well, because it helps with pancreas function. And it helps to stabilize blood sugar. It's a beautiful plant. I have to tell you guys that they say that if you don't cook them, that if you eat them raw, they'll make you gassy. So make sure to to roast them or fry them. They're fantastic roasted, by the way. And then of course we have the asparagus there. And then on the right there, a lot of people yesterday didn't know what that was. That's garlic. Those are actually garlic plants. And the little curly stem that you see there are the garlic stems. In grocery stores, they call them garlic scapes, okay? So you're going to go into your grocery store this summer. And if you go to Natural Grocers, if you go to the Bizman Co-op, or if you have a local co-op or a local grocery store or a farmer's market, you will find garlic scapes there this summer. I almost guarantee it. Garlic scapes are very quickly becoming this really popular food item. And if you like garlic, they're kind of like a mild, crunchy, green vegetable-y version of garlic. So, they're wonderful in all kinds of dishes. And, we teach our students how to grow and plant perennials as well. If you've ever heard of permaculture is, of course, creating and influencing systems. And so they plant a lot of perennials in these systems so they can just kind of plant it and forget it, through our gardens, we don't just grow food, we grow medicine as well. Things like bee balm on the left, also known as Monarda fistulosa, which is incredibly antimicrobial. We use it as a tea, we use it as a poultice, we make salves out of it, all kinds of stuff. The plant in the center, I'm limited on time today, so I'm not going to tell quite all the stories that we were telling yesterday, but I wanted to say the plant in the center is called uen-yue-dah-pee in Lakota, and it means the leaf that you chew, because it's used to freshen breath. And the leaves, it's incredible. The first time people taste them in front of me, I always love watching their reaction, because they taste exactly like a black jelly bean. And you know how there's like two kinds of people, like the people who are okay with black jelly beans and the people who like are seriously not okay with the black jelly beans. They taste exactly like a black jelly bean. And it's a really strong anise like flavor. And in fact, that's called anise hyssop. So yeah, you should definitely try this, Mary, and you should grow it, because it's a fantastic pollinator plant. It's gorgeous when it's growing in your garden. It puts up these beautiful purple spikes of flowers. In fact, all three of these, Al, are perennial. The bee balm, the anise hyssop, and the yarrow on the right are all perennials. And they're all amazing medicines, but get this, you can actually use all three of these plants for food as well. So the center one actually is really good for lung support. The anise hyssop is good for lung support. And the yarrow is really good for healing blood vessels and healing the epithelial lining of blood vessels. It's also good for clotting blood. We use yarrow to stop the bleeding of wounds. Yarrow, the scientific name, the plant on the right, is Achillea millefolium. And it's actually named after Achilles, because yarrow is mentioned all over the Iliad. So, I know a lot of you guys are history buffs and you love to read. If you've ever read the Iliad, they talk about how Achilles would use yarrow to treat the wounds of the soldiers who were fighting with him. He would crush the yarrow up and pack it into the wounds of the soldiers that were fighting with him. And the crazy thing is, it's used the exact same way by people all over the world. And it is very, I don't want to say it's hard to kill, Sherry, but it is very difficult. Sherry says yarrow is very hard to kill. If you plant one yarrow plant in your garden, you better expect that it will spread, and it certainly will. But it's an amazing medicine and an amazing pollinator plant. And let me tell you guys, if you ever have some trouble with yarrow and you have an abundance of it, pick some of the leaves, dry them, and turn them into a powder. And anytime you make any pasta dish, put a teaspoon or so of the yarrow powder in there as a spice. It is fantastically delicious, and it adds this beautiful flavor to your dishes, and everyone's kind of like, what is that? It's really good, but I can't figure out what it is. Thank you, James. James just warned us that we have 10 minutes left. Okay, I'm gonna keep going real quick here. We grow all kinds of medicine, like motherwort in the center there, which is amazing for anxiety and depression. And we don't just grow this. So as the food sovereignty coordinator, I don't just teach people how to grow these things. I teach them how to use them. So for instance, we'll go out and pick motherwort and we'll make tea out of it. Or we'll go out and harvest the yarrow that I showed you in the last picture, and we'll make a salve out of it. We'll go out and we'll harvest the rose hips from the wild rose bushes on the right-hand side, and we'll make muffins out of those because wild rose hips are delicious and nutritious. We'll go out and harvest the milkweed, like you see there on the left, and we'll make soup out of them. So I teach them not just how to identify these plants, not just how to grow them, but how to actually apply them to your everyday life, right? Because what's the use of like knowing that motherwort is great for anxiety and depression if you don't know how to make a cup of tea, right? And I'm always shocked at the number of students I have who really have no idea how to make a simple cup of tea unless they're given a Lipton tea bag. Yes, thank you, Robert. Yeah, all of this is harvested following protocols. We sing songs, we make our offerings. Usually it's with tobacco, but it just depends on what tribe you're from. And I always say, follow the protocols that are put in place by the people who came before you. You know, I follow Lakota protocols because that's where I live. And, you know, so I sing to the plants, I say prayers, I offer my tobacco, and I make sure to harvest sustainably. Through our gardens, we also teach a lot of food preservation. It's one of my favorite things to do. You know, you guys can see behind me, I actually have, you know, we go out and we harvest breadroot, also called prairie turnip, every summer. And we hand that out to elders. We make soup out of it. It's an amazing complex carbohydrate food source. That's the allowable starch in our house. But we teach a lot of food preservation. We teach how to dry squash, and you can dry summer squash. A lot of people don't realize so that's a zucchini that I'm holding on the far left picture. And you can see that I still have the knife in my right hand. And I've basically held that squash and I've cut around it to spiralize it. And then I'll just feed a rope or a dowel through it, and I'll hang it up and I'll let it dry. You know, maybe I'll open the windows to let some air flow through. The picture in the bottom right is actually rings of winter squash that I've cut, and I've strung a rope through them. Can you see that on the rope? And I actually hang that in my garage. So, you know, the garage is a perfect place. We're able to keep most of the insects out of there and stuff, and it works really well. So you can do that with any squash as far as drying goes. We dry watermelon, which ends up tasting like watermelon taffy. It's the most delicious thing ever, but we don't waste any part of it. So we teach the students to, you know, make watermelon rind pickles. And, you know, like I was saying yesterday, if you've never had some crispy fried chicken with a side of watermelon rind pickles, you are totally missing out because it's like the perfect food combination. We teach food preservation as far as pickling. We teach our students to pickle as well, whether it's refrigerator pickles like on the left, or water bathed pickles like on the right. I made pickled carrots. Yeah, delicious and nutritious. We teach about, you know, how you can really dry anything and how you don't have to waste things. You know how when you all have probably, at least hopefully at some point in your life, have had a garden. And if you haven't had a garden, please let this be the year that you start. Don't be afraid. People are so afraid to garden because they're afraid of messing up, but you just self-correct as you go along. I do a lot of programs with master gardeners who come to me and are like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. I planted my tomatoes this year and nothing happened. And they're master gardeners and have been doing that for 50 or 60 years, you know? Things happen, but something will grow. You know, I actually wrote an article last year. It's like, hey, plant some seeds, give them water and sun, and watch them grow. You know, it's really that easy. And then you self-correct as you go along. But, you know, you get to the end of the gardening season and you have all this green stuff left, kale and cabbage and, you know, all of these greens. And a lot of people just let them freeze and sort of die right there, right? We don't. We harvest all of that kale, all those cabbages, we cut them up and we dry them. And then we have like these jars and these bags of dried greens. And whenever, you know, like if we're making ravioli, we put a handful of that into our ravioli. If we're making spinach dip, we put a handful of those dried greens in our spinach dip. If we're making, you know, any kind of pasta dish, if we're making soup, we put a couple handfuls of those dried greens into our soup. I will tell you that drying greens changes the taste and the texture. And a lot of people really prefer the flavor of dried greens over fresh. And they still retain all of their nutrients. Also, what you can teach through a garden is language. These aren't our signs. We're actually still making our signs, but our signs have to have 5 indigenous languages, the 5 indigenous languages of North Dakota on them. Because we do Lakota, we do Ojibwe, and we do Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara languages on our signs. But it's a great way to teach language, and the elders and the kids love it because, you know, they can just go and learn exactly how to say the name of a vegetable in their language or a fruit, you know, and it really means a lot to them. You can teach how to network and how to trade. So that's my friend Rosebud Schneider. She's a member of the Lakota Ray Band of Ojibwe in northern Wisconsin. And she actually works in Michigan. And she brought those beautiful squash out to us so that we could save the seeds and grow them. And I ended up eating a lot of that squash. But she brought us those so that we could save the seeds and grow them out. In exchange, we gave her a bunch of beans and a bunch of corn. And then my friend, we actually took a bunch of buffalo meat out to my friend Chef Brian Yazzie. He's the head chef at the Gatherings Cafe, which is in the Minneapolis American Indian Center. And yeah, we traded buffalo meat. He gave us a bunch of plants and seeds to bring back with us. So, you know, trade networking is something that you can teach through gardening and through food sovereignty. And of course, we teach our students how to cook good food. Because have you guys ever heard the phrase food desert? We hear that all the time. Like in North Dakota, we live in a food desert. And that just means we don't have access to good food. But that's not really true. We could be growing it, right? But I remember I gave a bunch of kohlrabi to some of my students. I don't know if any of you guys have ever eaten kohlrabi before, but it's a green vegetable, kind of a bulb like this, right? And I think, Mary, were you just shaking your head like, no, I don't know what a kohlrabi is, right? Yeah, that's the thing. I gave them a kohlrabi, right? Good, nutritious food. And they were like, what do I do with it? You know, like we don't just live in a food desert. We live in a culinary desert where we have forgotten how to cook a lot of things, you know? And so you can give people all the food that you want, but if you don't teach them how to cook it, it's not going to take them very far. So we garden, we try to teach them everything from the beginning to, from the first stage all the way through. And yeah, we have a lot of fun doing it too. Did I make it? Did I make the time limit?
Yeah, we use culturally based teaching all the way through to stories. That's what's funny is like most of the time we'd be telling a lot of stories along with what we're teaching, because you learn. A lot of people will remember the stories before they will remember if you tell them all the little reasons why the three sisters work together better.
So yeah. Linda, a comment and a question. So I texted Carrie, the gal yesterday who said I don't like vegetables, and said, hey, Linda just mentioned you. And she said, tell her I had corn with lunch. And I texted her back and said, she would tell you that doesn't count.
Tell her, nope, that's a starch.
So I am not a gardener. I literally can kill anything, including, everything, including wooden flowers. Seriously. So you and Robert, you guys have inspired me to try a container garden. I have the container and I'm actually going to put stuff in it this year, maybe. But having said that, the idea of the drying just really intrigues me, because we're really bad at Like we buy them and then we don't use them and then they get all lucky, you know. Can you do that with store-bought food as well as you can if you've grown it yourself?
Absolutely. And like, I do another whole presentation on that because have you ever had a banana chip before? Like eaten a dried banana, like in trail mix? Yeah, they're gross. They're super gross. But if you get bananas from the store, and you know how like you get bananas from the store, I could show you the bunch of black bananas I have hanging over there. You get them from the store and you swear, I'm going to keep those and I'm going to make banana bread out of them or whatever. No, you're lying to yourself. You are not going to make banana bread. Put them in a bag in the freezer. They'll be there next year. No, we take them and we slice them and we put them on our dehydrator. And they turn into banana chips and they are crazy delicious. And you don't have to do anything to them. You just literally slice them and dry them and that's it. And they are so good, like just mind-blowingly delicious. And we do that with everything else. You know, if we notice that like, hey, you know, that bunch of kale that you brought from the co-op the other day, we haven't used it. We'll just take it and throw it on the dehydrator and then add it to the dried kale that we have from last year, you know? And you know, that's only if we have fresh kale, but we do that with everything, even like leftover onions, you know, like if we have onions that we've chopped up to put onto chili or something, we'll throw them on the dehydrator and there we have dried onions and we just put them in soup stock later or whatever. You can do it with anything.
And one of the things that if you're starting to grow, that's what a lot of people are like, well, I can't grow and I kill everything. You know, think of them as you would when you raise your kids or stuff like that, because, you know, we pray and we talk to, and one of my stories is I can go out to my garden and talk to my plants, all kinds, but I can't go and talk to a woman out somewhere else because I just so shy. But I can stand in the garden and talk all day. But really that talking and thinking and treating them like that, like they're a person.
It's true.
That will help your stuff grow better. Because you see, I've seen people that have gardens where they didn't do that and some did, and you'll be like, that's like 4 times as big as these guys. Well, they're over here talking and praying and treating their gardens like that.
Yeah. And you know, the reason most people end up killing stuff in their garden or in their house is because it's like parenting, like he was saying. You know how there are people who overparent? I'm guilty of that. You know, I'm one of those mothers, like a helicopter mom, right? So I have to pull back because that's not good. But like underparenting isn't good either. It's the same way with gardening. You can overwater and you can underwater. You know, you just kind of need to be in the middle of the road. You know, I don't want to over garden or under garden. Like we just need to relax and realize like that food, they want to grow. These plants want to grow because they want to produce seed and they want to like perpetuate themselves into the next generation. I have to tell you, Mary, I kill every houseplant I've ever tried to grow. I don't even want to show you guys the aloe plant that I have up on top of my shelf there that I'm sorry. It's so embarrassing. Like I've tried to grow aloe, of all the easiest things in the world that no one can kill. I can kill it. But when it comes to outside stuff, I grow food because I grow a lot of food. So you can do it.
Jerry, I think the correct way to ask your question isn't when Mary should bring her plants in. It's when are Linda and Robert coming to Mary's backyard to help her plant her container garden?
We can do that. You know, we actually
we've been known to do that.
And we also love to come out and like show people about all the edible wild stuff that's growing in their yard and on their land, you know, so let us know.
One of the things too I teach about gardening is people don't realize they did a study and 90% of the people that were over 100 years old and healthy, 90% of them garden. And if you just think about all the stuff you're doing while you're gardening, eating fresher stuff, moving, having a relationship with your plants, all that stuff is going to make you healthier and live longer as your total wellness, not, oh, I can run a mile. No, everything else makes a big difference.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for having us again. It was really great to be here.
I have a quick question, just a real quick question. Have you guys ever tried the 3 sister method with asparagus beans?
No, I've grown asparagus beans twice and I really like them. But I've never tried Three Sisters with them.
Okay.
Are they not a bush
No.
bean? I thought they were a bush bean.
No, they're a trellis bean, but they'll grow as tall as the trellis can as you put up. So you put an 8-foot trellis up, their plants are going to grow 8 feet and
Yeah.
grow 1 foot beans.
Yeah, they're huge. I love them. And I've used them like in stir fry and stuff, but I've never used them in a Three Sisters garden before. That's actually an interesting idea. I wondered though if they wouldn't tear the corn down.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe I'll have to put a trellis up.
Yeah.
But you guys inspired me to actually try corn in a raised bed. I've always been like, it just takes up too much room, but I'm going to try it.
Yeah,
If
no.
you get native, some of the native corns are only like 3 feet high, especially up around North Dakota, the Lakota and Mandan and Rikra, all these corns up here, they're smaller and they only have like 2 things. So they're easier to grow.
Okay.
And our coworker Scott, he's amazing. If anyone, he's an agroecologist. If anyone ever needs to come visit with him, he actually says that he prefers growing corn in a raised bed because it does better, and you don't have the issues of it falling over in rainstorms and things like that.
I'm gonna give it a whirl.
And one of the, yeah, he used to work at Bismarck, the college there, but one of the things when he started working with us, and I told him, and he's like, I never thought about that. That makes me so less stressed, is when we're growing stuff, you know, and sometimes animals will get your stuff because, you know, even us guys, but I told him, hey, you have to plant a little bit extra, or you expect animals to get something, just pray to them or talk and say, hey, there, you took some of our stuff. I'm not mad at you. Leave some of the other stuff for us. So, and when he realized that, and he said, geez, there's so much stress that I was stressing out about animals taking stuff. And then I realized, well, they need to eat too. And the way you're like a circle with everything else, animals, plants, and people, that, you know, that's keeping the circle together, where if you try and cut everything out and nobody touch anything, it's not really a good way to do everything.
Well, you guys, I know James wants to thank you guys, but I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, James, I've been doing this to him every session.
It's
They're
okay.
going to kick me in the shins next time they see me. But I just want to say you guys were so amazing yesterday and today. This was such useful information and really, really inspiring. Go ahead, James.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I enjoyed it yesterday and today, and I actually want to hear more sometime. I don't know when, but anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much. All right. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you more in the future. So
Yep, anytime. Thank you guys.